Good evening, Virgo. Something broke open in them recently, not gradually, not in the slow, forgiving way that realizations sometimes arrive, building over months, softening themselves into something manageable before they fully land. This one arrived suddenly, in the particular merciless way of a truth that has been suppressed long enough that when it finally surfaces, it brings everything with it, all the evidence, all the moments they chose not to examine too closely, all the times they knew somewhere below the level of comfortable awareness and made the decision to keep moving forward anyway. It arrived, all of it, at once. And what it showed them, what they have been sitting inside ever since, unable to fully escape even in sleep, unable to rationalize into something smaller than what it is this. They let go of the best thing that ever came into their life. You, and they know it. Not with the hazy, partially formed quality of a suspicion or a nagging feeling, with the specific, dimensional, completely sober certainty of someone who has finally done the accounting and found the numbers entirely, permanently against them. The clarity they've arrived at has no soft edges. It offers them no comfortable alternative interpretation. It simply sits in the center of their chest, solid and immovable, and tells them the truth they've been outrunning since the moment they made the choice they can now see was the greatest mistake of their life. Let me take you inside this realization because it didn't arrive as a single thought. It came in pieces, each one adding weight to the thing being assembled beneath the surface of their daily life, until the assembled thing became too heavy to ignore. The first piece arrived in a quiet moment. Ordinary circumstances, nothing remarkable about the setting, nothing that should have produced what it produced. They were doing something mundane, the kind of activity that leaves the mind unoccupied enough to become honest. And into that unoccupied space came a memory of you, not a dramatic one, something small. The particular way you did a specific thing or said something that only you would have said in exactly that way, or looked at them with the quality of attention that was yours alone, a small, unremarkable memory. It stopped them completely. Because in the stopping, in the sudden stillness produced by something so ordinary and so entirely irreplaceable, they felt the full dimension of your absence for perhaps the first time. Not the abstract absence, not the idea of you being gone, but the specific, textured, daily reality of a world that contains everything except the particular quality of presence that was yours. That was the first piece. The second piece came through someone else, a conversation overheard, or directly participated in, or perhaps something passed to them without the messenger fully understanding what they were delivering that contained information about you, about who you are now, about the life you've been building in the time since they made their choice, about the version of you that exists without them in it. And what they encountered through that information was not a diminished you, not someone struggling, not the version of events that would have allowed them to maintain the comfortable narrative that things worked out the way they were supposed to, that you've both landed where you needed to be. What they encountered was you flourishing, not performing flourishing the real kind, the kind that reads, even at a distance, even through secondhand information, as genuine, as someone who has done the internal work, found their footing, moved in the direction of their own life with a wholeness that didn't require anyone's permission or presence to sustain itself. And something happened in them when they received that information that they were entirely unprepared for. They were not relieved. They were devastated because The narrative they'd been using, the one that said you'd be fine, that it was better this way, that the ending was perhaps sad but ultimately correct, required a version of you that needed them. A version that would be diminished without what they'd offered. A version whose flourishing depended on their presence. What they discovered is that your flourishing is entirely, completely, beautifully yours. You don't need them to be extraordinary. You never did. And that understanding arriving as it did, with all its implications about what they gave up and what they underestimated and who they allowed to walk out of their life, broke something in their chest that has not yet mended. The third piece was the one that made everything undeniable. They tried to replace what you gave them, not maliciously, not as an experiment or a test, in the natural way that people do after the end of something significant, when life continues and other people exist, and the ordinary mechanics of the heart suggest that eventually, with enough time and enough different company, the specific ache of a specific absence softens into something general. It didn't soften. Every interaction with someone new has functioned, regardless of how promising it initially appeared, as a measuring exercise they didn't intend to be conducting. And everything has been measured against you. Not against an idealized version they've been at this long enough to have lost the inflation of nostalgia, long enough that what they're comparing against is the real you, the complicated you, the you with the full texture of an actual person rather than the simplified silhouette of someone who has become a memory. The real, specific, unrepeatable you. And nothing has measured up, not close, not almost. The gap between what they had with you and what has been available since is so significant that the comparison itself has become its own daily evidence of the magnitude of what they lost. Every conversation that doesn't reach the depth of yours, every presence that doesn't hold the quality of yours, every moment of connection that gestures in the direction of what was once ordinary between you and falls short. The falling short is relentless. And it has taught them something that no amount of reasoning could have produced, that what they had with you was not replaceable. Not because the world lacks good people, because you are specifically, particularly unrepeatable, and they chose in the moment that mattered most not to understand that. I want to sit with what this person is experiencing now in the present, in the ongoing, because it's not a clean grief, and I think you deserve to understand its real shape. There is regret. Enormous, settling, nowhere to put it regret. The kind that doesn't come with a clear action to take that would relieve it, that simply has to be inhabited, moved through, carried in the way that people carry the consequences of irreversible decisions. It sits differently than ordinary sadness. Ordinary sadness knows what it's mourning. Regret mourns the choice itself, the fork in the road, the specific moment when a different direction was available and not taken, and the mourning of a choice carries the additional weight of personal accountability that ordinary loss doesn't. They cannot assign this grief to circumstances or timing or incompatibility or any of the comfortable explanations that make endings feel inevitable rather than avoidable. This ending was avoidable. They know that. With a completeness that doesn't leave room for the comfort of believing otherwise. They chose this. And they are living inside that choice in a way that has changed them, changed what they believe they deserve, changed how they assess their own judgment, changed the particular quality of their relationship with their own decision making in ways they're still understanding. Because discovering that you were capable of the biggest mistake of your life, that the version of you that existed at that moment had the error in them, could execute the wrong choice with enough conviction to see it through, is not a comfortable self knowledge to acquire. They are not the same person who made that choice. The making of it and the understanding of what it cost has ensured that something I need to address directly because I feel it in the energy of this reading, and I think leaving it unnamed would be a disservice to you. They want to come back, not as an idle wish, as an active, if not yet actioned, intention. They've been sitting at the edge of reaching out with a frequency that might surprise you, composing and reconsidering, moving toward and retreating from, in the specific pattern of someone who knows what they want to do and is terrified of what it means to do it. The terror is layered. They're afraid you've moved on, and the evidence of your flourishing, while devastating to the narrative that excused them, also suggests a version of your life that may no longer have the space they occupied. They're afraid that approaching now, after the time that has passed, after the choice they made, will read not as courage, but as the inadequate, too late gesture of someone who only understood the value of something once it was gone. They're afraid that even if you listened, even if you gave them the space to say what they need to say, the person they hurt is not the same person who would receive the apology. That last fear is the most accurate. You are not the same person. You are more, Virgo, I want to speak to you now, not about them, not about their regret or their intention or the shape of their private reckoning to you, to what you are doing with all of this as it arrives in your awareness. Because something has been happening in you alongside their realization, a kind of parallel process, quieter, less dramatic, but equally significant that I want to name carefully. You already knew. Not intellectually, not as a conclusion you arrived at through analysis in the body knowing way, the way that certain truths settle in the physical self before the conscious mind ratifies them. You've known at some level that this person eventually came to understand what they walked away from. There was a moment, perhaps multiple moments, where you felt it, where something in you said, they know now. And you didn't quite know what to do with the knowing, so you kept moving, kept building, kept directing your energy toward the life in front of you rather than the chapter behind you. That was wisdom. But it left something unprocessed, a part of the story that never received its full accounting, a grief that got compressed into functionality because there was life to live and you were going to live it with or without the closure you deserved. That closure is approaching, not because they can give it to you, they can offer words, and some of those words will matter, but the real closure has already been building inside you through your own healing, your own becoming, your own refusal to let someone else's mistake become the final word on your worth. The closure is arriving in the form of knowing completely that you didn't lose. You didn't lose. I want to stay with that for a moment because I think it needs more space than a single sentence. When someone leaves, the immediate emotional architecture of the aftermath can feel like loss, your loss, specifically the thing taken from you, the presence removed, the future revised in a direction that wasn't chosen. And real grief lives in that experience. Real cost. I'm not asking you to minimize what it cost you when this chapter ended, but step back from the immediate and look at the full shape of it. What they walked away from was the opportunity to build something extraordinary with someone extraordinary. What you walked away from was someone who, in the moment that called for clarity, chose incorrectly, not through malice, through the particular limitation of someone who didn't yet know what they had, who hadn't developed at the point that mattered the discernment to recognize what was irreplaceable until the irreplaceable was no longer present. They took the loss. They are living inside it right now. You, Virgo, you took the lesson, integrated it into the foundation of who you've become, and continued building on ground that is yours, that has always been yours, that no one's departure can excavate from beneath you. The accounting is not in their favor, and somewhere in you, in the quiet where the truest things live, you know that here is what your spirit team wants you to do with all of this, with the knowledge of their regret, with the awareness of their approaching reach, with everything this reading has surfaced today. Nothing rash, nothing reactive, not the rush toward them that old longing might suggest, and not the performance of indifference that pride might recommend. Neither of those responses belongs to who you are now. Who you are now is more grounded than both of those options, more self possessed, more able to stand inside a complex emotional situation without being immediately moved by it in a direction that isn't genuinely yours. What your spirit team asks is simply this: receive this information and let it settle. Let it tell you what it tells you about your own story, about what you survived, what you built in the aftermath, how far you've come from the person who absorbed that ending with the particular quiet dignity that everyone witnessed and no one fully thanked you for. Let it confirm what you've been slowly allowing yourself to know, that what was between you was real, was significant, was worth the grief it cost, and also that you are not defined by its ending. That you continued, that the continuing produced something in you that the relationship, even at its best, perhaps couldn't have. And then, with all of that settled, with the full picture clear, decide what, if anything, you want. Not what they want, not what would be poetic or what would give the story a satisfying shape, or what the part of you that still holds some warmth for them is tempted by. What you want from the most honest, most self knowing, most fully healed version of yourself that has access to this question. That answer is the only answer that matters. They made the biggest mistake of their life. You survived it. And in the surviving, in the quiet, unglamorous, completely private labor of continuing to be yourself through the aftermath of someone else's failure of vision, you became more entirely, more confidently, more irrefutably yourself than you were before. That is not a consolation prize. That is the story, the real one. The one that doesn't center their mistake as the defining event, but places it exactly where it belongs, as one chapter in a life that has always been and will always be fundamentally and gloriously yours. Their regret is theirs to carry. Your becoming is yours to keep. Walk forward with it, all of it. If this reading reached something real in you today, a part of the story you've been carrying that needed to be seen differently, I'd love to meet you in the comments. You don't have to explain everything, just arrive. We'll hold it together.